Hi, Ronald Holt here, and I'm going to share some perspectives on what I feel is going on at this time. Of course, to try to relay the depth and scope of what's going on, it's going to require me to go over some details. So, with that in mind, many of us have been feeling a lot of strange energetics going on at this time. And it seems to be sweeping through our lives and creating a number of dramatic changes, some of which are very unknown to us. And so what I'm hoping to do is to share enough of a larger picture so that it becomes easier to understand what's happening now in the energetics. And as we understand what's going on, it makes it far easier for us to start to go with the energies. So having that larger perspective really helps us in acclimating to the new energies. All right, so to begin with, I'd like to share a perspective about coming from spirit, or coming from the quantum. So you're going to see me use a couple of different terms here, and those terms are the quantum and the Hindu perspective of Purusha. I'm going to use them kind of interchangeably because they both speak about a very high level of consciousness, a very integrative level of consciousness. And at that integrative level of consciousness, it seems like the dualities that we understand as paradox have been merged harmoniously. Okay? So, in this state, this quantum, or this state of Purusha, this consciousness state that is harmonized with the dualities, we are in a state that's quite different from us living in this 3D. And I'll get into that in more detail, but it's sufficient right now to look at the main difference. And the two main differences of this 3D state and this paradoxical state called Purusha or quantum is that the paradoxical state is a state of beingness, whereas in this state we are separated, so we're in an individuated state, a state of separation. Okay? So with that understanding, we can look at where we came from as being a state of beingness. Okay? And we can model that from an upside down V. All right, and in that upside down V, we were simple being, a state of being. So there was no separation. There wasn't an object and subject. There was just beingness. And the beingness, like I said, paradoxically, the dualities were merged, and when they're merged, they're completely shared. So we came from a state of beingness, and we dropped down from that state of beingness. Metaphorically speaking, we went from being to doing, and from doing, we then separated even further into thinking. Okay, so as a metaphorical example, as you can see, the V kind of describes a state that's reducing the encompassment of your relative beingness, separating it to the point of separation until finally you became separated entirely from this beingness state, seemingly, and you were born. Now, on the planet, when we come into this world, we come as babies, but when we come in as babies, we're in that beingness state. We don't have much thinking going on, and as a baby, there's not a whole lot of doing. So we're fully in a beingness state. So when we were born onto this planet, we became beers in our babiness. As a new being, we were totally unified. Now, in that beingness state, we felt fulfilled, we felt connected, we felt complete, except when our physical needs arose and we needed somebody else to help us with our physical needs and get the food that we need and the love and attention and so on. Okay, so from this state of beingness, as we grew, we started experiencing doing, and from the doing state, we got all of our experiences necessary that helped us move and develop our thinking. So we see that we went through this state, and in this state, it's really important to look at these three levels because we can equate this to the 4 states of matter. And our 4 states of matter start off with solid, liquids, gases, and plasma. What's missing? Well, if we were to continue on this state in this fashion, we would then move into etherics and consciousness. Okay, so now we see this relativity here between this double V. The double V has us moving from a state of being into doing, then thinking. And as we arrive on the planet, we've separated so far that we begin the process over from a beingness state. We start doing, experiencing, learning, establishing data, experiential data memory. And from that, we start maturing into our thinking, but our thinking also moves into our spirituality. And so we go through this process, and eventually we start to move back into that beingness through our spiritual practice. We're trying to understand how we came from such vast states of paradox into the depths of separation. All right, so now we can understand that as we go through this process, we're moving through these states. And these states have very important relativeness to what's going on with us right now. However, adding to this, we have to take another element into consideration. And that is, as we grew, this is an individual who's happened to be sitting down. And so this kind of reflects an image of us where when we came in from being, from source, we were open as a baby and even as a young child into our adolescence. We didn't have a whole lot in the mental body going on, so our mind was open. Wasn't very active, but our emotional body was huge. It was open and connected and touching everything. And because this emotional body was open and touching everything, then every fiber of our being was open to receiving, so we were fulfilled. Until what? Well, when we started experiencing challenge, challenge often led to trauma, and trauma in these challenges had us feel in our emotional body contraction. At the same time that we were feeling contraction, because when we're that open and you experience such depths of pain and trauma, and you don't have the wherewithal, you don't have the adult mind, the great database of experience to help you understand what's going on emotionally, then what happens is we tend to emotionally polarize, good, bad. We place labels on the situations that we've experienced as a child because little or rarely did we have the attention and assistance of the adults around us to help us really process our emotional body sufficient enough to where we didn't create a belief system and a story, okay? So without the help of that very holistic adult consciousness helping the emotional body of the child to begin to process, belief systems started to crop up from this emotional polarization of the events, challenges, dramas, traumas that we experience. And so oftentimes we make a belief system and a story. This is very much like the elephant being trained as a baby, being tied to a thin piece of rope or string, and with that string it defines the boundaries that the baby elephant is able to go in, and as that's reinforced time and time again as the elephant matures, then the elephant believes in the strength of that string and the boundaries, so the elephant then has created an entire belief system based on an illusion. Same thing that happens here, okay? But here's the thing. Emotionally, as we've experienced some of these pains and traumas, we began to contract. As we began to contract, because it doesn't feel good, and we wanted a way to ward off how we were experiencing such depths of feeling, because it didn't feel so good, we looked for a way to still embody here and be present and not have so much pain. And so what we did is we found that we can employ greater amounts of focus, time, energy, and preference towards the intellectual. So this intellectual part of ourselves started to grow exponentially over time, while the contractions seemed to recede our energy. And notice, as the contractions continued in our life, we start to feel more and more separated, more and more rigid, more and more invested in our mental perspective and priority lists on how to deal with reality in our lives, get our needs met, and still function. All the while, we're closing this emotional body down. Okay. These haven't gone away. And so this is important when we're looking at this pyramid, or this double pyramid here, and we're moving back from being, doing, and thinking back into our spirituality. Well, if we've pursued just the closing down of the emotional body and the continued investment into everything intellectual that gives you joy, that gives you support, then this area of our being is going to be hugely empowered, where this is disempowered. But when we're coming back to here, there's something that happens right here that nullifies this. In other words, there is a juncture here that it takes balance in these two in order to pass through this juncture here. And that's what I want to talk about. It's huge, but I got to lay some more groundwork here. So, I've got to go into another aspect, and that next aspect, we have to go back to Purusha, or the quantum. So I need to explain a little bit about that. Now, let me grab a different board. We'll get back to this shortly. Purusha. It's a Hindu term. It's a Hindu term about consciousness, but it's more than just consciousness. It's a term that equates everything. And so we can only speak about this term from a metaphorical point of view. In that metaphorical point of view, let's just say that consciousness exists everywhere. So Purusha exists everywhere. There is no place that it is not. And so, for the longest time, many cultures who have come across this use this symbol of a circle to denote this consciousness. This consciousness without any boundaries. This consciousness that's infinite in every direction. So if I was to draw this as Z, X, and Y, it's every direction, every possible direction. So this symbol is not really a circle, but it's a sphere, and that sphere is everywhere. There's nothing on the outside of it. So the illusion of the symbol defining a boundary is false. It's a paradox. So consciousness is paradoxical. But you get the idea, because I can't use a symbol without drawing anything. We lose the perspective. All right, so from our 3D state, to define a boundary using a circle as a symbol for a sphere, and that sphere being infinite in all directions, consciousness is that. Now in that consciousness, since there was nowhere to go outside of itself, somewhere along the lines it had some idea that to evolve it decided, I wonder what it would be like, metaphorically, I wonder what it would be like not to know myself. So Purusha, as you can imagine, being the symbol for all paradoxes. If you think of anything manifested, yin and yang, those are two dualities that are harmonized within the state of Purusha. It's harmonized within the paradox. Paradoxically, it's two different aspects, yin and yang. When they're together, harmonized, it's shared through Purusha. So if you took up and down, left and right, male and female, every duality that you can think of, and that would amount to an infinity of dualities, all those dualities married, unified and shared, is in Purusha. So Purusha is a collection of infinite dualities that are paradoxically, harmoniously shared. So Purusha we can call quantum, because it exhibits all the principles of the quantum state. Quantum has a state called entanglement, and quantum also has a state that's called superposition. And superposition is expressing all of those dualities through all probabilities. Any which way you could have a duality exist is a probability, and all those probabilities exist within the quantum all at once. So in superposition, everything is shared, just like Purusha. All the dualities are shared all across that consciousness state. What ends superposition is entanglement. And entanglement is when there is unconsciousness in what binds or merges the dualities. I'm getting out there a little bit. So, Purusha and Prakriti, our next step of the dualities is to understand Prakriti. So inside of Purusha, since nowhere on the outside of Purusha existed anything else, then within Purusha, or within the quantum making a decision, making a choice, I wonder what it'd be like not to know myself. In that moment, it creates inside of itself some place that's unconscious. Because of the fabric inside of Purusha, is consciousness, sharing all the dualities, to create a new space, it had to embrace part of itself, and in embracing part of itself, ask that part to go to sleep, because it's just consciousness. The only thing it can do is go to sleep. So, Prakriti, or this space inside of Purusha, which is a void, was created. And we can see this very easily if we take a balloon and we use that symbol of the balloon, like we said earlier. This is a sphere, symbol of Purusha. So if we take Purusha, consciousness, the fabric is very malleable, meaning it can stretch, you can bend it, you can do many things with it. So if we take that balloon and we twist it, bottom side one way, top side the other, we create a condition where we're taking that balloon, one side we're twisting one way, and the other side we're twisting the other way, so that we get this. Okay? Now, in creating this twist, now we have the new space. So let's say this is Purusha. And this is Prakriti, or void. This part here decides to go to sleep. Now we have two different realities. A duality is created. And in this duality now, from here, we can start to move into the void, where manifestation of all of the diversity of life that we know as all of the stars, planets, galaxies, and so on, are created inside of Prakriti, inside of the void. Now, this is huge, what we're talking about. Reason why I'm bringing this up is because we started off with talking about how we came from being, doing, thinking, and into separation consciousness as the identity that you know. But who are you really? Well, if we look back and we understand what we just went over, this Purusha quantum and Purusha Prakriti, we can see that Purusha is you, Prakriti is you. So we have a duality, and then you're inside of Prakriti as an individuated human being. So now we have Trinity. This is how big that the energetics are affecting us at this time. Now, to understand this duality a little bit further, we got to go in just a little bit more deeper. Earlier, I was talking about this and this state. Now, this state here, this dualistic state, we could call this the mental. We can also call it the masculine. And this here, we could call the emotional. And we can also call it the feminine. So, when we dropped out of here and went unconsciousness, into unconsciousness, we forgot who we were. We forgot this fullness. We forgot about the creation of this void. And we forgot our part as a separation consciousness in all three of these aspects simultaneously. So what happened at the point of going to sleep? Well, let's first look at yin and yang. Yin and yang so harmoniously working together. And they're constantly in motion, constantly spinning. Where they came from is here. What they're expressing is this. They express it even on our own lives. So, this dark part within the light, a little bit of feminine inside the masculine, a little bit of masculine inside the feminine, they're excuse me, they're inextricably linked. What I mean by that is the female part inside the masculine seeks the masculine inside the feminine. More importantly, this relationship between our inner female and our inner male is huge. But if we look back at what's been happening in our lives as we've been growing up through our spirituality, through our experiential basis, we've been learning a little bit about the qualities, both positive and negative, of the masculine and feminine. Eventually, we've come to the point where we're accepting that, yes, I have masculine in me, yes, I'm also feminine. Well, it goes much deeper than that. As long as there's a disharmonic, meaning an unconsciousness, and unconsciousness breeds dynamics, arrogance. It creates enmity. Eventually, though, through all of the events, dramas, challenges of the masculine and the feminine, they begin to learn appreciation over time, and they start to harmonize. So when we look at the perspective of the male-female aspect inside of ourselves, what pulled it apart? Unconsciousness. Unconsciousness, where we went to sleep here, is what pulled the two dualities apart. So we could actually draw the coming apart of our duality. And there's a bridge, an inextricable, unbreakable bridge between the two. They cannot be kept apart forever, because your consciousness will begin to feel the need to bridge these two poles of your duality. So as you begin to harmonize, what was once this bridge of contention between you two, causing some separation within yourself, because you feared some aspect of the masculine or feared some aspect of the feminine. In the feminine, oh, I'm weak if I stand in my female up against a powerful male, and vice versa. Well, over time, we've gathered enough intellectual experience and perhaps even physical experience to where we can begin to emotionally hold this aspect of ourselves just as open as this aspect of ourselves. In other words, we stop the fight inside and make the bridge, then these two can come home. These two dualities can flow one inside the other. That's a part of what's happening now at this time on a larger scale, is the pressure is being magnified about what is dissociated here. What is causing these two to remain apart? As we start to stand in our nakedness, in our truth, in our vulnerability, against the dramas and the trials that we face, we begin to see a way out of polarized dynamics and how to integrate our own dualities so these two can make it home. So, when we experience experience moving into the void, let's just say we moved into, oops, we moved into 3D. So this is X, Y, and Z axis. Everybody understands X, Y, and Z axis of 3 dimensions. Well, at this moment when we moved into here, let's just redraw this way. And we can label these as our dualities, inextricably tied to each other. 3 major ones in our being that we deal with, especially at this time, that are critical. Let's just say this is the male, this is the female, this is the inner child, and this is you now as an awakening adult, trying to bridge this connection. The inner child is inextricably linked to the adult that you are now. When these can bridge, then higher self and false self or lower self can start to come home, because the only place for lower self to go for integration is back to center. The center point is the quantum point. The center point is that point on the bridge where you've reunited. So, from the superposition state of consciousness, which Purusha is, there's no more quantum entanglement on the bridge of your duality, so the duals, the dualities inside you, can then come home in total appreciation. What happens in that case is you start loving and appreciate yourself. You start clearing this Mobius inside. So this orbit of the masculine and feminine, or mental body and emotional body, when there's a bridge, then the Mobius can flow easily. Here's the quantum point. All parts on here are unrestricted. They're not blocked with quantum entanglements or portions of your consciousness that has not yet found appreciation and understanding of the whole you from Purusha, Prakriti, and separated self, separated into the dualities. So each of your challenges that come up emotionally become really important, really critical at this time. Now, we just drew the Mobius, so let's draw the Mobius here. Male and female. There's our yin and yang. Inner child and adult, another Mobius. Higher self, lower self, another Mobius. Very important, these 3 inner aspects, inner dualities are critical to keep us out of the victim and warrior. When there's imbalance in one of these, we get thrown instantly into victim or warrior. Victim and warrior should be a flag to us to tell us, hey, there's something on our bridge, our consciousness, our heart, a belief system that's causing a quantum entanglement and dropping you out of superposition. Superposition is when you harmoniously merge your dualities as paradox. This is paradox. Now, oops. this becomes important here. What was done down here long ago in our past as a painful incident. It's almost like a little balloon. And that balloon has a bunch of unresolved emotions, unresolved psychology to it. Just like the elephant. It keeps tying us back down to this state of contraction. Just like the elephant tied from a baby back to the boundary. This is a quantum entanglement. My inner child workshops, that's what we work with. From a quantum level, we start looking at these aspects. At any rate, these things become important to us, especially now as many individuals are starting to hear word of a gamma event coming from the galaxy, the center of the galaxy. Gamma event is speaking of a frequency, which I'm going to get into in just a moment, but gamma is so critical for us to really understand and employ in a holistic base, what I was just going over with this earlier drawings, to get it from the Purusha, Prakriti, void, and separated self perspective. The quantum entanglements become critical because we're getting help from an energetic level that's forcing these things to open back up. And if we're clear on what these are, we can see the perspective in the holism from Purusha to Prakriti to your separated self, even as a child. Boy, these things were made when you didn't have an adult mind to help you, to assist you. So as a child, you polarized these things. You made very simple, good, bad rationalizations of what was occurring. And because they continued to occur and you didn't think you could do anything about it, you then made stories. I did this hugely. We all did. We made these stories of disempowerment. We made these stories of self-worth. We made all kinds of stories to help us maintain the emotional contraction and the psychological belief system that keeps us contracted. So as we're getting help, these things are starting to open back up. What does that mean? Well, as you open up a balloon, it's kind of like an old balloon. It's kind of like having a hose out on the lawn that you've left for a year. So the first time you turn it on, the first stuff that comes out is junk. Well, these things, which have been reinforced time and time again as you keep repeating these issues in your life, because the great quantum, great Purusha of life that you are, keeps repeating them in hopes that you can get a little more clarity on there, open and clear these things. So why I'm saying this is because if we look at ourselves from the perspective of raising our children make mistakes. And we have so much compassion for them. Do we judge them? No. It's impossible to judge a child. It's impossible to judge you, though. But we find out we're our harshest critics. And that's important to understand as the energetics are starting to help us re-employ, reopen, refloat this balloon, this emotional vastness, this emotional body of ours. Because in order for us to integrate solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, etheric consciousness, we can't do it intellectually. It fails. It's only, if it takes 3 cameras to make 3D something really lifelike in a theater, well, imagine if the mental body is only one of those projectors, we can't integrate. We got a good concept of it. We can go so far with that mental body and the mental perspective, even our mental spirituality. Even we think we're emotional. We think we're moving into our emotional body, but that's a protection circuit. Are you really emotionally deconstructing the walls, the barriers, connecting you with all life? That takes surrender. That takes stepping out of a mental habit and pattern of trying to control reality according to the conveniences that you're used to. So moving into the emotional body is actually entertaining what is most needed for integrating all these levels. We need our emotional body to help us move into a more liquid state. Between the emotional body and the mental body, when they're integrated well, then we can move gaseous, plasma, etheric consciousness very easily. But we need the emotional body. So we're having this support, this energy, this effort coming from the galactic center. Also, our timing in the solar orbit, our solar orbit within the galaxy. All of this is working, conspiring to help this emotional body open back up. Now, let's get into where we're going. I hate to erase any of this because I think I might use it very shortly here. All right, well, before I can get finally to where I'd like to go, I got to talk about the brainwave states. In the brainwave states, if you haven't done any research on this, I'm not going to get into it really deeply. I'm just going to give you a cursory overview of it. But we have a basic brainwave state called beta. Beta is our 3D consciousness state, and it's our everyday consciousness. It helps us move about in this physical world, taking care of the business that we need to do. That beta consciousness is from 8 to 15 hertz. Hertz, cycles per second. Okay? Now, many of you who have begun meditating have heard of the alpha brainwave state. Alpha waves are from 4 to 7 hertz. Alpha wave is at the beginning of meditation. It's the beginning meditative mind. From alpha, we move to theta, and theta excuse me. Eight to 15 hertz. And this is 16 to 31. Beta is 16 to 31 hertz. Excuse me for that. Okay? Alpha is 8 to 15 hertz. Delta is 0.1 to 3 hertz. Delta is your sleep state. So we don't stop there in meditation. We keep going deeper. Those of you that have been practicing meditation for a long time are experienced with theta, and theta is from 4 to 7 hertz. Okay, like I said, these are hertz, cycles per second. Okay, so gamma, in 1988 there were tests being done on monks, and they found that with monks, Tibetan monks, who have been practicing for a long time, they found something very unique. They found that they were disassociated parts of the brain to meditation. But at gamma frequency, gamma level, those dissociated parts began to integrate. That's an important element to talk about here. So gamma rays, gamma is from 32 to 100. Gamma brainwave. Hertz. Now look how close that is to this, to beta, 16 and 31. It's the opposite side. Yet alpha, delta, and theta are at lower frequencies. All right. Now the important thing that I brought up was that with gamma, disassociated parts of the brain begin to integrate. All right. As I said, we're talking about hertz here. Now, when we're talking about the quantum and Purusha, what did we say at the beginning? We said it was consciousness. Consciousness was all things. There was no boundary, and it extended infinitely. All right? So, our scientists have designated the brainwave states as such, hertz. All right? But I want to point out that hertz, after hertz, cycles per second, then you have kilohertz, then you have megahertz, then you have gigahertz, and it keeps going on. Where am I going? We're talking about an event that's happening at the Galactic Core. So at the Galactic Core, probably you've been hearing about gamma. A gamma event is occurring. Gamma ray occurs at 10 to the negative 12 to 10 to the negative 14. That's nano. But that's that's gamma ray. Gamma brainwave then is hertz. Way down here. When we're talking nano, it's way up there. But remember, if we looked at the electromagnetic spectrum, I wish I had another board. If we looked at the entire electromagnetic spectrum, we'd see everything from color, sound, infrared, all the way up to X-ray, gamma rays, and such. What part of the electromagnetic spectrum is consciousness? All of it. So when we're looking at consciousness here in brainwave states, we're talking about what they've been actually able to pick up off the brain. Okay? They're not picking up all of the spectrum. That your consciousness actually exists. Remember back here, Purusha. It's all consciousness. So everything in the galaxy, everything is you. All dualities are you. We got separated by unconsciousness. Unconsciousness is the energy that caused the separation of the dualities. And once dualities begin their separation, well, they begin this spiral. I'm lazy, so I'm drawing my spiral. Let's say that's the beginning of separation, and the spiral starts in the void, and it begins slowly moving through cycles and seasons over and over until it can embrace more and more of the whole of the galaxy, the whole of the universe. So our dualities are on this road of reconnecting back to source through experience, through understanding, through consciousness. The experience gives us the consciousness to end our separation entanglements of consciousness, where our dualities can come home and we get to experience this reunification. All right, now I can finally get to where I wanted to go. So I'm going to use this metaphor here. Let's get rid of the brainwave states. I need to make some space. And let's open this up. I need a little room here. I'm using this as a metaphor of that symbol of the balloon that was twisted. And as it twisted, part of it was folded one way and the other was folded the other as we were twisting the center point of the balloon. Okay? So folds were being made in the balloon. All right. We were being here, so part of the journey for us has been stepping down into the folds, the windings. The windings are kind of like separation consciousness. Separation consciousness is, if I was to use a metaphor, everybody knows the sheer fabric that sometimes bridesmaids wear on their head. You can see through it in weddings. You can see through the fabric. I think it's called tulle. Imagine a very sheer fabric like that. You can see through it. However, if you added windings to it, then it starts to obscure the view. It starts to blur the view. And the experience is, it kind of deadens the feeling body with so many windings and turns that you're not connected. You feel separated. So as the balloon twisted, we started infolding. All right, so we went through a process of infolding this tool around us, and we had these belief systems, experiential belief system, and those belief systems are part of our quantum entanglement. Our quantum entanglement acts on the tool, the fabric of the universe, wrapped around us in so many folds, but it's our pain that keeps them in place. So as now we're experiencing coming back up through experientially, unwinding, as we experience the unwinding of these emotional balloons, we start to see our heart is very much in two parts. One part is expansive, it wants to continuously expand. The other part is contractive. So, At the core of our heart, the contractive parts are painful until you've gone through enough of your own stories to see you've cleared out the emotional body, you've cleared out the issue, you see through the entanglement, the belief system. So now what you have left is you feel a pinch, a pressure, but without a story. This is huge. As we've been taking care of our emotional body through each of the belief systems, through all the charges in any of the balloons, then we start to experience that these contractions of our heart have no real story. And when they don't have a story, you can easily pass through them. So, what's beginning to happen now is these are starting to unfold. We're starting to pass through these thresholds of energy that seem to contract the heart. So our own stories of the belief systems we used to have, as we stop employing them by seeing through them clearly, they no longer impede us, which grants us access into the next threshold. And as we get closer and closer up this energetic density layer, we move into an area that is strictly void. These are layers of separation. What exists here. Separation is density layers. Like a rainbow of spectrums, we move up through these layers of density. And as we pass through the thresholds of these layers of separation, we get ourselves closer and closer to beingness. And beingness, as we get closer to the void, something starts to happen. The folds inside of us that enable us to structure a self start dissolving. They start unwinding. That could be very uncomfortable. That could be hugely dissociating unless you've done your work in employing the emotional body and the dualities. You've ended the fight between the dualities, so home in your heart feels so good and comfortable that it's so fluid. So as you're moving through these separation layers and you move into the void, now there's no more orientation. If you're in the void, and day by day we're getting experiences like opportunities to move into voidness. In voidness, it's highly contrasting to the separation consciousness. So, inside of this voidness, we get this opportunity to experience unfolding and acclimating inside a vast realm where nothing is familiar. So, if we get used to that void right here, so we get sufficiently comfortable with the void, then this is time. And time is a matter of frames. And so popping through these frames, like we saw in the brainwave states, alpha, allows you to pop in between the frames a little bit. Delta and theta enables you to go deeper. Gamma, deeper yet. Well, the event that's taking place of the gamma wave not brainwave state, but gamma wave from galactic center, gamma ray, gamma wave, is an enormous amount of energy that's so integrative, so vivacious, that as you pop through the time element, it rapidly helps in unfolding your fabric. From the twist in the balloon, we begin to experience the writing and opening of the center part of the balloon, which was a fulcrum, now begins to open up, and you begin to experience seeing yourself in a whole different perspective, non-structured. This is quantum. This is Purusha. And it takes a lot of self-love, ending these dualities, ending the battles, ending the dramas inside you that allow this frequency of gamma ray, which is like a very strong electrical, but electrical, emotional, it's integrative on all levels. It's like a serpent, like a golden dragon. Many golden dragons coming up from inside of you, coming up from deep inside of you and opening up this point. Opening up the duality, merging the dualities. So anyway, hard to express on the depths of all of this, but I hope some of this has made sense. Anyway, that's what I'd like to share today. Thank you very much for listening. All right, so took a lot to share all of that. And if you're starting to experience some of these emotional realizations, some of these emotional events in your life, there's hope. There's a lot of things you can do. I'm creating a course called Quantum Navigation. And that course is dedicated to this part, our Purusha self. There's a way that in meditation, when you've come to a deep enough silence, the greater voice comes, a navigator, a quantum navigator. That's this, Purusha. It's you. And many of us, when we start to experience the emotional body and many of these unravelings, it's huge for us. It's hard to go through the surface tension of these deeper levels that seem to be making you more naked, more vulnerable, more sensitive. What do you do in that case? Well, there's a lot you can do. And this Purusha, this quantum navigator self, will help you navigate where you're at with this and help you through direct visions, direct understanding, knowledge, downloads. It's amazing the different ways that it'll help you. However, if you're kind of lost with all of this, what do you do first? I would say one of the greatest helps you can do is get out in nature. If you know where power spots, where you can go for an hour or two, that would be very helpful for you to acclimate to what is natural and holistic. Because around you right now, in the world, everybody's firing or reacting off of everybody else's mental and emotional body. It's hard to maintain a balance if that's what's going on. But if you see that kind of stuff going on in your environment, then make some time. Give yourself the treat out in nature of an hour or two at a power spot preferably where you can meditate and make quiet time to connect with that inner guide. As I said, I'm offering different courses on the inner child work, which is huge, coming from this perspective and trying to work with all of these idiosyncrasies of the belief system and the emotional attachment to the emotional addiction to the belief system. I'm doing that kind of work. I'm also working with the true self and power spots. So I'm offering these courses, but if you're a meditator, go to that quiet space within, empty your teacup of all your problems, and from your heart, inside your heart, carry your concerns. When you empty the teacup, express your concerns, and then let them go, and try to abide inside of the quantum. By abiding inside of the quantum and giving yourself a chance to fill emotionally, quiet, mentally, you come to a holistic balance and you open the door for the possibility of receiving direct from your quantum navigator. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful, and hope to see you sometime. Thank you.